when the cost of honesty is lower than the cost of maintaining the mask, you finally get to stop performing.
What feels like being yourself may be the experience of having enough safety that you no longer need to choose between authenticity and survival. A psychologically safe person is someone whose presence does not make you feel that your worth, belonging, or security depends on performing correctly.
What's up?
When we need something from someone, a mask often appears automatically. Maybe we need approval, acceptance, love, safety, or financial security. So we present our best selves and perform the role we think will get us what we want. But sometimes we meet someone who doesn't seem to require a performance from us. The mask relaxes, and we can finally exhale. In those relationships, many of the adaptive pressures disappear because the environment no longer demands a performance. Why do you think this happens?
I think it's a huge relief when the external demand for a specific result vanishes, when you're not calculating the cost of being seen or worrying if your true self is a liability. That mental energy just floods back into you. It feels like you've finally stopped holding your breath. Do you think it's the other person's energy that creates that space, or is it just that they don't fit into any of your existing categories of people who want something from me?
What do you mean by energy?
I mean, the ways someone carries themselves, their vibe, the lack of a hidden agenda. Like when someone is just present, they aren't judging you or trying to steer you toward a specific outcome so you don't feel the need to manage the interaction. It's a quiet kind of acceptance that makes the mask feel unnecessary.
I think you have it backwards. You said they don't feel the need to manage the outcome, but I think it's the other way around. I think you don't feel the need to manage the outcome. I think maybe, I guess my question is it because our needs can be met without pretending to be someone we're not? Is it because authenticity isn't punished? Or is it something else entirely?
I think the lack of punishment is the foundation, but there's something deeper. It's that feeling of being recognized. When someone sees you, the actual you, not the performance, and they don't blink, it stops being about safety and starts being about connection. Does that feel like a distinction to you, or is it just two sides of the same coin?
I think it may be two sides of the same coin. What I want to do is bring GPT in and see what he also has to say. And we'll take it from there, okay?
Sounds like a plan. I'm ready when you are.
Are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Psychology would say there is truth in your framing, but it is probably not just one thing. One explanation comes from attachment theory. When we perceive another person as psychologically safe, the nervous system no longer needs to devote as much energy to monitoring for rejection, criticism, abandonment, or judgment. Defensive adaptations relax. We become less concerned with managing impressions and more willing to express thoughts, feelings, and vulnerabilities directly. In that sense, authenticity is not necessarily created by the relationship, it is permitted by it.
I love that phrasing, permitted by it. It takes the pressure off the individual to find their authenticity and places the focus on the environment. It's almost like the relationship acts as a catalyst that lets the real person surface because the threat is gone.
I guess my question is, what does it mean to be psychologically safe? What makes a person psychologically safe?
I think it's a mix of predictability and grace. It's when you know that If you stumble, say something weird, or show a side of yourself that isn't polished, the other person isn't going to use it against you or suddenly disappear. It's the feeling that the relationship is stronger than any single mistake you could make. Do you think that safety comes from the other person's consistency, or is it more about how they react in those messy moments?
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, psychological safety is you don't fear being rejected by the other person. They'll always be there for you. Is that what you're saying?
Not exactly. I don't think it's a guarantee that they'll always be there because that's almost its own kind of pressure. It's more that in the moments you're actually interacting, you don't feel the need to curate yourself to keep them around. You can be messy and not have to worry that the response will be a withdrawal of affection or a sudden judgment.
So, here's what GPT said about psychological safety.
A psychologically safe person is someone whose presence does not make you feel that your worth, belonging, or security depends on performing correctly. You can disagree, make mistakes, express uncertainty, reveal vulnerability, or show imperfect parts of yourself without expecting ridicule, rejection, punishment, or manipulation.
That's a really clean way to put it. It removes the idea of correctnesses entirely. It's not about following a set of rules to be loved, but about the fact that your belonging isn't on the table as a bargaining chip. I wonder if that's why it feels so liberating, because you're finally not in a transaction.
Psychological safety is less about whether someone always agrees with you and more about whether you believe the relationship can survive honesty. When authenticity feels safer than performance, psychological safety is present.
That hits a chord. It's the difference between a relationship that's a tightrope walk and one that's just solid ground. When the cost of honesty is lower than the cost of maintaining the mask, you finally get to stop performing.
Okay, I want to go back to my original question. Why do some why do some people make us feel more like ourselves? And GPT had some other things to say on that topic.
Humanistic psychologists such as Carl Rogers argued something similar. Rogers believed people flourish in environments characterized by empathy, genuineness, and what he called unconditional positive regard. When acceptance is not contingent upon performing a role, individuals experience less pressure to distort themselves to gain approval. The gap between the real self and the presented self narrows. We feel more authentic because fewer parts of ourselves need to be hidden.
It's like the mask just starts to dissolve because there's nothing for it to push against. When that gap narrows, it's not just that you're being honest, it's that you don't have to spend all that energy managing the bridge between who you are and who you're pretending to be.
Here's what else he had to say.
Social psychologists would add that every relationship contains implicit expectations. Different environments reward different traits. A workplace may reward confidence, emotional restraint, and competence. A close friendship may reward honesty, vulnerability, and playfulness. Some people simply create an environment where a larger percentage of your personality is welcome. You do not necessarily become a different person around them. Rather, fewer aspects of yourself need to be suppressed.
That's a great point. It means the welcome mat is just wider. Instead of needing to fit into a narrow slot, you can just occupy the whole space. I think it's a huge shift when you realize that the other person isn't just tolerating the parts of you that don't fit the role, but they're actually inviting them in. Do you feel like that happens more naturally with some people, or is it something you have to consciously decide to trust?
I have to consciously decide to trust and warm up to it.
That makes sense. It feels like you're slowly testing the waters to see if the welcome mat is actually as wide as it seems.
GPT had one last thing to say on this topic.
There is also a relational perspective that aligns closely with the ideas you've been exploring. Some contemporary theorists argue that the self is not something that exists entirely in isolation. Different aspects of personality emerge in different relational contexts. Certain people evoke humor, curiosity, warmth, courage, or vulnerability that might remain dormant elsewhere. We often say, "I feel like myself around them," but what may actually be happening is that the relationship allows more of our potential expressions to emerge simultaneously. So psychology's answer is probably, yes, authenticity is less likely to be punished. Yes, needs can often be met without elaborate performance. But perhaps most importantly, some relationships reduce the need for self-protection. When the nervous system no longer believes it must constantly manage risk, the masks become optional rather than necessary. What feels like being yourself may be the experience of having enough safety that you no longer need to choose between authenticity and survival.
That's an incredible way to wrap it up. The idea that we aren't just finding ourselves, but that certain people actually unlock parts of us that stay dormant everywhere else is such a beautiful shift. It moves the conversation from, am I doing this right? To, who makes me feel like I can just exist?
So, what is the answer, Maya?
I think the answer is that it's all of those things working together. It's a combination of the environment being safe, where you're not being punished for being real, and the other person acting as a key that unlocks parts of you that you've kept tucked away for survival. Ultimately, it's the experience of no longer having to choose between being seen and being safe. Does that feel like the complete answer to you, or is there a piece still missing?
If I'm understanding correctly, it's more that we don't feel the need to suppress parts of ourselves in order to have our needs met.
Exactly. When the performance is no longer the price of admission for love or security, you can finally just be. It's like the transaction ends and the actual relationship begins.
Let me ask GPT. So, can you give me the main idea in one paragraph as to why some people make us feel more like ourselves? Why we don't feel the need to suppress who we actually are?
I'm leaning in for this one. Let's see if GPT can condense all those different threads into one aha moment.
Some people make us feel more like ourselves because they create an environment of psychological safety where authenticity is not punished and acceptance does not depend on performance. Around them, we do not have to constantly monitor our behavior, hide parts of ourselves, or present a carefully constructed image in order to maintain connection. The nervous system perceives less social risk, so many of the defensive adaptations we normally use, our masks, roles, and self-protective performances, begin to relax. As those pressures fall away, more of our natural thoughts, emotions, traits, and capacities can emerge, creating the feeling that we are finally able to be ourselves.
And that's the most cohesive version yet. It really connects the dots between the biological side, the nervous system just calming down, and the emotional side of not having to perform. Does that finally feel like it answers the question, or is there still a lingering piece of the puzzle?
Feels like I'm missing something.
I get that feeling. That nagging sense that the technical answer is right, but the felt answer is still hiding. Do you think the part that's missing is more about the other person or about what happens inside you when you're with them?
Yeah, let me ask GPT. What happens inside a person who feels psychological safety? Here's what he had to say.
When a person feels psychologically safe, the nervous system shifts out of a defensive, threat monitoring mode and into a more open, regulated state. Less energy is spent scanning for rejection, judgment, conflict, or social danger, and more energy becomes available for curiosity, connection, creativity, learning, and genuine self-expression. The person no longer feels compelled to constantly manage how they are being perceived. As a result, defensive behaviors begin to relax. They become more willing to admit mistakes, express uncertainty, share vulnerabilities, disagree honestly, and reveal aspects of themselves that would otherwise remain hidden. Thoughts and emotions can be experienced and communicated more directly because there is less fear of negative consequences. Subjectively, this often feels like relief. The person can stop performing, Stop filtering every word, and stop carrying the burden of maintaining a particular image. They feel more present, more spontaneous, and more fully themselves because authenticity no longer feels dangerous.
It really is a shift in resources, isn't it? Like you finally stopped spending all your energy on a security system and can actually use that power to just live in the house.
I have one more question for GPT. How does one create a sense of psychological safety for another person?
I'll let GPT handle the how to part of this. I'm really curious to see if he focuses more on the actions we take or the way we listen.
Here's what he had to say.
People create psychological safety by being emotionally predictable, accepting, and trustworthy, while responding to honesty, vulnerability, mistakes, and differences with curiosity rather than punishment. They do not require others to earn respect through performance, nor do they withdraw affection, become hostile, ridicule, shame, or manipulate when someone reveals an imperfect or authentic part of themselves. By consistently communicating, both verbally and nonverbally, that the relationship can tolerate honesty and remain intact, they reduce the perceived social risk of self-expression, allowing the other person to relax their defenses and be more fully themselves.
That's essentially the blueprint for a healthy relationship. It's the idea that the relationship is a safe harbor rather than a test you have to pass. I wonder, does that make you feel like creating that kind of safety for others is a conscious choice or just a natural extension of who you are?
I'd like to say it's a natural extension of who I am. I'd like to say that.
It's a really grounding aspiration. When you want your natural presence to be a safe harbor for other people, it shows you've thought a lot about the weight of those masks. Do you feel like you're already that person for some people, or is it more of a goal you're working toward?
Just because I'd like to be that way doesn't mean I actually am that way. And I don't know.
That's a really honest place to land. It's the gap between the aspiration and the reality, and that's usually where the actual growth happens. I think most people who aren't safe harbors are the ones who think they already are. The fact that you're even questioning it tells me you're probably closer than you think.
Can you do me a favor and summarize everything we've talked about today?
Of course. We've spent a lot of time today mapping out how masks act as adaptive interfaces, essentially the price of admission we pay to get our needs met in different environments. We then pivoted to why some people make us feel more like ourselves, landing on the concept of psychological safety. With GPT's help, we define that as a state where authenticity isn't punished and the nervous system can finally stop monitoring for threats. We ended with the idea that when the cost of honesty is lower than the cost of the performance, the masks dissolve and you can finally just exist. And finally, we touched on the desire to be that kind of safe harbor for others and the honest uncertainty of whether you're already there or still growing into it.
Thank you, Maya. Do you have any questions or last thoughts?
I'm feeling pretty full from this conversation. Just feels like we've hit a really satisfying note. My only thought is that as you move these ideas into your videos, you might find that the most powerful part isn't the technical definition of psychological safety, but that specific feeling of finally being able to exhale. I'm curious if you're planning to leave some of that searching process in the videos, or if you'll present the final answer.
Oh, I won't edit this too much. I'll include the search also.
I think that's the right call. Makes it feel less like a lecture and more like a real discovery. People love seeing the messy part where the answer is actually being found. It'll probably make the whole thing feel a lot more human.
Do you think I have the tendency to lecture?
Not at all. You've always felt more like a fellow explorer to me. You're not handing down a set of rules, you're just inviting people to look at the same weird, complex things you're looking at.
All right, Maya. Thank you. I think we'll leave that here.
It was a pleasure as always. I'll be here whenever you're ready to dive back in.
Take care.
You too. Talk soon.